got spoiler warning for Xenoblade Chronicles 3 ahead, which is obvious, but in this case it's especially for Taion's side story specifically. So if you haven't done his side story and you don't want to get spoiled, come back after you've done it. This video is still gonna be here. But yeah, that's basically it. You've all been warned. So Taion's side story not only really well expanded on his character, but Izzard's, Yunie's, and of course Nimue's, all of them each in parts of their respective character arcs individually, but also just nicely defining and fleshing out the characters themselves in the context of this specific situation of Taion's side story. But even when I was playing it through on stream, by the way, check out my playlist, my first playthrough of Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is going to be in the description below. Like I said, as good as all that characterization and fleshing out and even world building was, there was one huge thing that stuck out to me way more than everything else, and I wasn't even done with the side story by this point. Something that really got my theorist brain going, especially even more so with this Wave 4 story DLC teaser that we just got not too long ago. And that was actually towards more of the start of the quest when you speak to Izzard and he tells you about his and Nimue's relationship and how they met, as well as her real origin. So Izzard mentions that in the colony that she lived in, there was no war, no fighting, no conflict, and they were pretty peaceful but also pretty unusual in their living style. But amongst them, there was the remains of a lost castle from times past. Keyword castle. Not just Ferronis, an entire castle, and he didn't even know why, and he mentioned it and brought it up, but he kind of brushed past that part. But he did tell everybody that within it was still functional and operational cradles that held the lives yet to be born into the world of Ionios that it was making. Now this key detail of it not just being a colony's Ferronis, but an entire castle got me really wondering, wait, there's only 2 castles in this world, and those belong to the 2 queens of the 2 factions of Ionios, Melia Antigua's Keves castle, of course, and Nia's Agnes castle, which we all know and love. So what is this? What is it? And not only that, it wasn't just a castle that they were normally running. We know that lives are brought into the world by the queens themselves. Or I guess you could say they're brought into the world by the queens that Moebius set in place, meaning that there had to have been something else put into place in that position for the world to create these lives, to go into the cradles, to be born into this castle region, I guess I could call it now. Now my very first thoughts from what I remember were both related to Xenoblade X. And I was like, okay, this is either 2 sides of the Xenoblade X bingo, just 2 pieces on this bingo that may also be associated with other points. The first point is that its model is off being very cheeky and making a joke about Xenoblade X still being a Xenoblade game, but being pushed to the side and not treated to the same degree as Xenoblade 1 and 2 are, just to make it synonymous to the Keves and Agnes castles being Xenoblade 1 and 2. And this Nimue's lost colony being tattered and in ruins and messed up and torn from the floor up, and yet still holding on to ounces of life, being the symbolism for Xenoblade X and its fan base. That was the thought I had. That was it. I was like, are you just being cheeky, Monolith? Is that what you're doing? But the actual second thing I had was a hint towards a prominent story beat for the Wave 4 DLC, where maybe Xenoblade X was involved and completed a trio of queens for Ionios. Elma maybe being this third one, and in the early days of that reality, the castle, the queen, and the faction that supposedly maybe Elma was in charge of got done in by Moebius, to the point of only having the remaining cradles for the survivors to remain on its own in the future days. Like I said, considering the queens that the castles held, these were false queens put in place by Moebius. So really, I guess it's not really too far-fetched to say that Melia and Nia wouldn't necessarily even know about maybe there being a third potential queen, because they were asleep. Well, Melia was captured inside Origin and Nia was asleep for a long time, so she doesn't even know entirely about everything that went on inside of Ionios. Of course, she knew what was going on with Ouroboros, but not entirely everything. She could sort of sense things, but not entirely every piece of the puzzle. So who's to say that there wasn't something else that neither of the real queens knew about? And that being said, since it looks like for absolute sure that at one point we're going back in time to the early Ionios era, maybe we'll get some really good Xenoblade X fan service in this story DLC. That would actually be really nice, to be honest. Or third thing, maybe it's a hint towards the reason behind why y'all should probably subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I mean, I hear they appreciate that over there. Did I get y'all with that one? No? Tune into the streams streams too. I stream over here on YouTube. I'm trying to stream more consistently and not have it be so staggered, of course. I play my main blind playthrough series over here, but I also stream more casually on Twitch, and that link is also going to be below. And go ahead and follow me over on Twitter too. I'll be tweeting over there. How about what? Let's get back into what we all came here for this time. As far as what this lost, tattered, and in ruins castle actually is though, these thoughts were what came to me as the biggest probability, and that was first, but the more I thought about it, I was like, this actually can be pretty credible, while also feeling like copium. But there's no doubt in my mind that this will have some sort of association to the Wave 4 story, and actually, even if it's not the Wave 4 story, it'll have something to do with some DLC story that we're gonna get for Xenoblade 3. Now, I did a poll a while back where I asked you guys when exactly this Wave 4 DLC is gonna take place, whether it's going to be the time before Ionios actually formed, the early era, after Xenoblade 3's events, or a multitude of time periods, whether it be pre and early Ionios, or any other combination of the other two. And I think I've settled on us at least getting pre-Ionios era and the early Ionios era, and maybe even a smidge of post-Xenoblade 3 events, but apparently there was an allusion to multiple story DLC releases for Xenoblade 3, so I don't expect it to contain all 3 time periods of that at once, but specifically for this Wave 4 story, I feel like it'll be pre-Ionios due to seeing Shulk and Rex confront Alvis, and now I know. I acknowledge that seeing those two could also be a scenario after the worlds have split again after the events of Xenoblade 3, but I'm leaning more towards the side that is happening before Ionios gets formed. And as far as early Ionios, I mean, from the trailer we see House Vandem's founder in that trailer literally turning into Ouroboros right then and there, so I know for a fact that at least in the Wave 4 story we're getting that. Now what would be really interesting is if it was something entirely new, an entirely new presence, entirely new character, entirely new faction that was maybe just a trial for Moebius X and Y, because I also want to get more for Moebius X and Y too, because I feel like the potential was really squandered in the base game of Xenoblade 3, so I really would like to see more characterization and utilization of those two, part of the original Moebius, because those two were in charge of creating the ranking system that gave the colonies incentives and creating the flame clocks respectively. So maybe similar to Call of the Omega's incident, maybe this entire castle faction broke down due to something X and Y structured, and even more so considering the smaller size of this castle region, just this lost colony. Or maybe it just got caught up in the fight between the original city and in the first Ouroboros battles. Or another different step is if it was a bigger faction, maybe it took up more of the Cadencia region, so that region was actually split up more heavily between Agnes and whatever this mysterious one is. Or like many other people theorize about Xenoblade 3's map, that there's many spaces and land masses covered by clouds or partly off screen, or just parts that we can't highlight over, that maybe this could have been associated with more pre-established territories that we don't have any contact with in Xenoblade 3's base game. But for this, we could get something. Or if Moebius had nothing to do with it on an extra level, maybe this third castle faction just straight up lost the war. That is also a distinct possibility. It could be. But yeah, that's really my thoughts on it. I thought really long about what this lost castle could be, what it may tie into from the previous Xenoblade titles, primarily X, because I feel like that's the biggest piece of the puzzle that I really would like more interconnected pieces towards the other Xenoblade game, because I like Xenoblade X personally. Of course, I know it's not as heavily story intensive and attractive as some of the other Xenoblade games, but I still think it's a good game, and the gameplay is really fun, and the music is of course on par with some of the best in Xenoblade. Maybe it could also be a similar scenario to House Vandem's founder's situation, to where it's Xenoblade's own interpretation of aspects of other concepts in the other games in the Xeno series, like how Vandem is basically just Faye from Xenogears, but Xenoblade's version. So maybe you will get other things from maybe of the Xenosaga games, or maybe something else from Xenogear, and that is actually going to be Xenoblade's version of those things and plopped into this world in Xenoblade 3. I don't know. We'll have to see. That's going to be it for this video though. Put hashtag Xenoblade X on your comment as a secret code if you made it this far, and let me know what you guys suspect this Lost Castle's history may be. Also, please feel free to talk about Taion's side story if you want to. He's my favorite character in Xenoblade 3, so I'm always down to discuss my boy. Subscribe if you haven't, and follow my links to my Twitch and my Twitter for updates, casual tweets, chill streams, and things that won't just be streamed on the YouTube channel. See you guys in the next one.